same therapy that we do.
I guess maybe they do. They're all looking for some outreach of therapy. I saw Avatar yesterday.
Oh, well, that's like 3.5 hours of your life or something,
oh my
right?
God. But it was really well done.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah, really well. In the 3D.
I get my attention span, for that long. Watching 2 parts.
Yeah, you need like a coffee break.
Right. Well, it's like the soccer game. The final was
that was a marathon.
Unbelievable.
Did you see what happened in Buenos Aires? Oh my God.
Well, I saw they had a helicopter amount or something. The celebration was
so many millions of people that came out.
And you can only imagine.
We're good. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to a year-end wrap-up.
I know. No, it's gonna be a fun show.
This year flew.
Really every year flies, and my old boss. I want to give some shout outs today because things show up in your feeds, this, that, whatever. First shout out to my old boss, Dominic Catalano in Alliance, Ohio, who used to say that as you get older, the toilet paper roll gets smaller and it rolls faster. So I'm not saying that you're getting old.
Oh, she's coming.
Good.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that you're getting old, Ruta. But
I am getting old.
Well, but seriously, it go fast. And of course, And of course, we're still in storm recovery mode over here. And 11 weeks, since, but we still talk to patients every single day, severely impacted and still recovering. And it's holiday season.
We got our roof last week, finally. So we got our roof in Arlen. I won't be ready till like April, May, if we're lucky.
Right. So be kind, to your neighbors, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we have a guest. And listen, an OG. An OG Canna Mom, Canna Warrior. I'm so excited to have her. Mariah Barnhart is joining us today. Hi, Mariah.
How are you?
Awesome. And listen, this comes with effort because she's been a road warrior. She's always busy. And I'm not going to steal, of the intro to the extent of, people that have been involved in medical cannabis and cannabis world in Florida, they know Mariah because I was so honored and it was so grateful to have met her early on. Was Greg Herman there when I met you, Mariah? Did you go to one of his lectures in St. Pete? Is that where we met the first time? But literally, she was one of the first. She worked on every amendment, every drive, and she still is, right? And now just came off a massive road trip where you were at St. Jude. And I will not get personal with the story, but it is Christmas time. And I know you posted some things on Facebook that made me glow. So if you want to start with that side of the story, and tell us about.
Tell her about her. We want to hear about her. People don't know. A lot of people do not know who she is because people from other states that are listening. So,
like I said, I don't like to steal anybody's intro, and it's so important. But Mariah Barnhart, literally, because of what happened personally with her and her family, as many of us who came into cannabis world, became the ultimate canna mom and advocate for the plant. So, can I leave it at that, Mariah, and you'll take the story over?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Creating the word Canna Moms was for that exact purpose, right? Like now it's just such a common word and it's used very casually in conversation. When we first polled on that a decade ago, people had no idea that it was referencing cannabis, normalizing the word cannabis.
Mm-hmm. A decade ago, 10 years ago, right.
Normalizing the word cannabis, both in the cannabis space and in mainstream, building that bridge. Because I do come from a very mainstream background, right? Sitting on the board of St. Jude, helping the YMCA create their first cancer survivorship program. So my daughter was diagnosed with brain cancer when she was 2. And that was a decade ago, which is when this journey started. For us, it was kind of an immediate journey because she didn't have a lot of options and conventional treatment was so harsh. She was an experimental patient. She was diagnosed with 2 types of brain cancers and kind of a made-up diagnosis, very aggressive, wasn't likely to make it through her first surgeries, much less treatment, and be alive today, but she is. And we do attribute a lot of that to cannabis. Whether or not people believe that it's killing cancer cells in the ways that we believe is another story, which is why we raise funds for research and continue the push for research. But in the meantime, our personal stories are really important. And that was what creating Canna Moms was all about, was bringing people out to share those stories. And then people can make their own minds up about, even if it just helped alleviate pain and suffering, wouldn't that be enough? It's one of the safest plants on the face of the earth with the most known medicinal benefits. And so that kicked off, coming back home to Florida. We had left Florida for treatment and then for cannabis. We came home to Florida to push for legislation and then Amendment 2. And we created Wise Florida last year to push for broader efforts, right? When you're talking about sick children and sick parents and families, you're kind of tunnel visioned. So opening up Wise Florida, Women's Initiative for a Safe and Equitable Florida, allowed us to talk about much broader issues and different types of parents who are fearing for their children's lives in different ways due to the war on drugs and specifically cannabis prohibition. And we've made a lot of headway since then. So while we're still working on medical, and this coming year, 2023 and 24, reciprocity, telehealth, the research allocation to Moffitt never made it there. So research, obviously the market's going to be going horizontal at some point. So talking about what that looks like, employee protections, and home
we're going to get to all of it. Yeah. And we talk about it. First off, though, you've never been in the green room, right? So this would be your first appearance.
Well, what's funny is I've probably been at your office as you filmed this and still have never been on. It would never have even occurred to us because we know each other personally.
Well, no, somehow that can be. No, we've been on panels together and listen, and I won't name your daughter because you may not want to do that in public forum, but I will put a face on your daughter as one of the most beautiful, unique, brilliant in her own way individuals that I've ever had the pleasure to meet, and I mean that. We've had Mariah and her daughter and her son as well. Never take away, because as a family, you've encountered the fear, of course, of the diagnosis. And listen, just to imagine what Mariah has had to do to talk to each neurologist, each oncologist in the various meetings that she's been in. So, really when you talk about digging in with the passion that you need, right, to really do this for 10 years, it's the love of a child,
Mariah, quick question. How is it, how were you greeted, in treating your child or giving your child cannabis? Was it resisted in the beginning, or how was that process? Is it opening up a little bit more, or what did you experience with the conventional physicians?
So initially we had gone to Tennessee. St. Jude only has one treating hospital worldwide. A lot of people don't know that. And that's located in Memphis, Tennessee. So we left Tampa, Florida after 3 hospitals here. And my daughter's still recovering from a pretty major brain surgery with partial right side paralysis and already kind of experiencing some of the heartache and trauma she'd be enduring. In that very first month of diagnosis, we left to Memphis, Tennessee to go to St. Jude, where we know that it's the world's leading children's research hospital. So when I first brought up cannabis, it didn't occur to me that even there, it would be so unknown. I literally had world-renowned pediatric neuro-oncologists looking at me and saying, do you mean marijuana? That's illegal.
Dope, weed, right?
Yeah, they had zero idea why I would be, sitting in their hospital asking them this. And so months into treatment, having suffered some of the most horrendous, just painstaking, months-long side effects, gastrointestinal blistering from the tips of your lips all the way down your GI tract, just drooling blood, comatose at some points, unable to eat, walk, and talk, and having to relearn all of that, losing so much weight that you're at risk of a feeding tube. And what people need to understand is, like I said, even if you don't believe that cannabis is being taken in and killing and targeting cancer cells, what you do know is its ability to help you recover could be saving lives, especially for these very, very severe cases. A feeding tube could have killed her, right? A cold could have killed her. So infections from surgeries can kill them. So the fact that she never had to get a feeding tube, started gaining weight, the atrophy in her legs started to dissipate. She was able to walk comfortably again. But really, that very first night we gave it to her, the doctors still weren't on board, but she had been stopping breathing and having to be resuscitated with a swollen, very difficult resuscitations. It's not like what they show on TV, hours long, blood all over the rooms, just really gory. And we had been taken to another hospital for an emergency surgery, her second shunt to be placed in her skull that's going to drain down to her stomach. And because she had been stopping breathing and had such difficult resuscitations, it was an emergency. So they had no medications available to her. They were all respiratory depressants. So she came out of that surgery with the potential of Tylenol being her only option for pain relief. So nobody was going to call the cops on us at that point. Nobody was going to call CPS or DCF. I gave her cannabis that day, and she woke up hungry and thirsty. She woke up, most importantly, happy to be alive. It was the first time in half a year that we had seen this little 2, now 3-year-old girl want to be alive. And I cannot explain watching a toddler lose their will to live. You would do anything. Nobody can say what they would do backed into that corner. I knew early on that risking losing me was a big risk for her. I was her only caregiver, her only comfort, her only love and support. And that threat kept me from using cannabis earlier. And so part of the whole thing with Canna Moms was it should never be a last resort. It should always be a first option.
Yeah. No, and that's why you've inspired me, through the years, to that extent. Do you actually remember what it is that you gave her for that first dose of a cannabis product?
So what's funny is a decade ago, we didn't have what we have today. So even though people complain so much about the program today, including myself, that's why I'm there every session. It's really amazing the products that we have on shelves today. What I had in Tennessee, which was an illegal state, was product that had been shipped to me from people's kitchens. And I had to have a lot of faith and trust in good people. An entirely new underground market was built from that point forward. For several years, an underground market was being put together by like PTA moms and pastors' wives. And I would go to these politicians and say, when you've got pastors' wives and soccer moms creating an underground market, you're changing the paradigm of society. You guys really need to be looking at the long-term effects of keeping prohibition in place.
Yeah. And here we are, 10 years later. And listen, just to wrap it up, but I know people are interested, and I know you did post it on Facebook, and I did see a fascinating CAT scan. And I don't talk Christmas miracles, Ruta knows, and I was going, where are my green scrubs today? But against the backdrop of the green screen, I would have been a talking head. So, and I don't have red ones, but it is holiday season. And listen, loving, your daughter as we all do in Florida, and of course yourself. Is there actually something that was on that CAT scan that is something?
Well, first of all, we have to be.
So Dahlia had brain
she's
cancer.
Alive.
She's here. She's brilliant. She's gorgeous. She's unique. Amazing. Are we done with chemo? Where are we?
Well, let me just say, a few months into, she started cannabis nearing the holiday season in 2013. And by early 2014, her, as I said, world-renowned pediatric neuro-oncologist at the world's leading cancer research hospital actually made the very difficult decision to leave St. Jude and go head up cannabis research. I don't think she had seen in all of her years and decades in that position a child be so helped so quickly. And you can't unsee what you see with your own eyes, right? And we're all in this to reduce suffering. That's, so she continued to see shrinkage of tumor off treatment that first year, and then was re-diagnosed multiple times, which is really common. So just like chemotherapy targets fast-growing cells best, cannabis seems to do that as well. We generally would recommend getting up to a 1-to-1, but honestly, with low, slow-growing cells, she originally was being treated for fast-growing cells. And we believe that cannabis played a huge role in actually killing those. It's not considered a treatable diagnosis. So that diagnosis is anaplastic astrocytoma. And then it was mixed with pilocytic astrocytoma. And those words will only mean something to a few people, but one is a very high-grade aggressive non-treatable cancer, and one is a slow-growing cancer that does all sorts of weird things and we don't really understand. But it doesn't seem to work so well with that slow growing. But what we have seen, she's had a genetic inhibitor a couple of times now through a couple of trials, and it was causing a lot of infections. So twice over COVID, she had to be taken off of treatment for these random infections that couldn't be treated. There was no viral infection. There was no bacterial infection. It was just a genetic mutation. And so she's been off treatment now for 9 months, and we just can't see any growth at all. I mean, we don't know for a fact that it's entirely dead, but there's been no growth for 9 months. And after a decade of treatment, that's the best we've ever had.
Wow, that's
Well,
amazing.
hallelujah for that. And, you know, like I said,
That's
and listen, it does, you inspire us, and listen, we'll talk as we go forward, because listen, Mariah knows what's going on, and let's start federally. Safe banking did not get included in the omnibus. I mean, everybody's disappointed,
Yeah.
especially the
Of
investors,
course,
because the
investors.
stocks, you know, have taken a
Plummeted
huge hit.
because-
So what do you
yeah.
know federally, Mariah, and where do you think we go next with banking, and what do you see going forward as far as descheduling, of course, never rescheduling?
Well, right. And so with the rescheduling, people need to be very careful, because what's happening now, you know, it is not a Democrat or Republican thing. You're going to see the same thing through every presidency. And when people think a new president's going to be elected with a new party and save us all, it's been pretty clear throughout my lifetime that that's not true. There are some things that are agreed upon behind the scenes through all parties and all administrations. And what we're seeing right now is token, right? And we don't like that. I actually like that less than no action. It's just very bothersome, because it does a couple of things, but the main thing it does for us on the advocacy side is it makes people believe that their advocacy efforts aren't as needed, right? So just like Florida passed the low THC law so that people wouldn't vote on behalf of a broader amendment, because it offset the public perception that it was needed. So nothing's actually moving along federally, other than that over the last few years, we've had more grows open up. So back when I started, Dr. El Soli is the only doctor in the United States overseeing a federal grow, where if you're doing federal research, you can obtain your medicine from there. And now we're seeing several, and we'll see several more. So that's a great step forward. But
right. And there was the research bill signed. That
right.
one actually did get through. So now, and Biden, you know, all the way through, Biden signed it. So there has been one small.
But what I'm going to say is I believe that this is a push to reschedule to Schedule 2, which would be horrendous. People need to understand that's actually so much worse than not doing anything at all. So right now we're under 3 global treaties that do not allow us to reschedule past Schedule 2. And if you want to do your own digging, it's not hard to find. The DEA even cites this in petition denials. They will say there is nothing we can do other than reschedule to Schedule 2. And so I was so grateful to be invited to the United Nations special session after forming Canna Moms, but it really opened my eyes to the fact that the United States affected global policy, but now global policy is affecting the United States. So unless we're willing to do the work to modify or cut ties with those global treaties, right now we can't deschedule or reschedule past Schedule 2. So that's the main issue with federal.
Yeah, sure. Did not know that one. And, you know, listen, and just getting more local here to Florida. And, you know, listen, so many things happened just over the past week. They came out with the new license rules under emergency orders.
You know, insane under emergency.
Oh, it is. It's crazy. I have something to say about that. And there's a lot to say about it. But also, of course, I want to make sure we don't skip over the home grow initiative that I know is really important to what you're doing right now. And, you know, as we look forward into the future, and you know, Mariah, this is an important point. We had Brady Cobb on last week, you know, just to the extent of, you know, name dropping. We had Nikki Fried on a couple, 3-4 weeks ago. Nikki predicted that they were going to limit the number of licenses, and there's no way in hell that they were going to allow 24 to come on the market at one time.
Yeah, it's going
also
be
notifying us
the batching process. Though.
Well, nobody, the certificate of batch took the biannual renewal fee from 60,000 to 1.3 million. So it's such a clear shot, you know, over the bow to the little guy that, hey man, you know, right.
I want to play just with the big boys. Yeah.
Right. So, and I know you're going to have your comment on it, but it's also the entire landscape of where we're going as far as going forward and forward. Constitutional amendment in 2024. It looks like True Leaves in on this on their own, right, Mariah? I mean, Brady, the reason I brought his name up is he spoke to this last week. And, you know, he said, you know, it's been branded as a True Leaf Smart and Safe with the Bellamy brothers. And I think that the rest of the guys may sit it out, which may be good for what you're up to, and tell us about the Home Grow Initiative and things like that, because listen, we're going to need some funding on that side as well. It is just for medical card holding patients for home grow. That's a really interesting distinction, important distinction. May not make the advocates happy necessarily, but Mariah and I know it's the only way that we're going to be able to squeeze it through here in Florida. So I'm going to open up to you, Mariah, and give us your perspectives on what's going on.
Right. So I actually started with 21 and up, and then I moved it to medical and 21 and up. And as it went through, the revisions and reviews, it was very clear that this was not going to pass. There's a lot of ways that they can keep constitutional amendments from passing. People like to believe that like you're an activist and you're going to go out and you're going to collect signatures. And there are a lot of ways that they keep these things from happening. So in reality, the only chance we have of passing anything is to do it this way: medical patients and caregivers 21 and up. And then when adult use passes, you go and write that into legislation. If they don't do that, you pass another initiative. But most states do it this way for a reason. And being in a Republican supermajority trifecta, where the hierarchy is not necessarily known, the hierarchy in our legislature is behind the scenes. And so there are a few people that you really have to go to for certain things. And right now, the discussion is that home cultivation for medical is actually not even controversial enough to leave off the table for session. So we're actually going to see potentially some introduction of home cultivation throughout session. But, I'm disappointed to hear that Brady Cobb had a comment on this has been branded one way or the other, because we all know the license holders are equally going to benefit from adult use. We know that patients want that. And we know that under the single subject rule, we could not include home grow or an open market in an adult use initiative. So it seems to me like some of the MMTCs are actually garnering love and support from the patients by feeding into a false narrative that somehow anything could have been different. The only thing that could have been different about that initiative, and that I myself lobbied for, was the amount. But like I said, we're going to have to take that initiative to the legislature to build the infrastructure to decide what that the definition of these amounts are. What can we have at home? What can we have on us? What can we purchase? Colorado, California, every state that people try to pin as like a broad market, a broad, free for all. In reality, they have a lot of restrictions, limitations, and regulations on purchase amounts and possession amounts.
Yeah, no doubt. People, and that's why I want to have you on this morning, Mariah, because people don't have an understanding of that. And, I don't overread Facebook or Twitter necessarily or any of them, but, the impression of the advocate, quote unquote, community out there is that we have to get home grow. It has to come with legal adult use. It has to be this. It has to be that. We're here in Florida, and it is a single initiative, constitutional amendment state. They will use what they need to use to keep measures off the ballot. Listen, you'll be excited by this one. I was asked to speak, and this was actually after last week's Green Room. So I have to announce it now, because on January 5th, I've been asked by the West Virginia patient advocate on their board of medical cannabis control. They have a 10% THC cap battle going on up there right now. I've been asked to speak for the patient, the plant, the doctor-patient relationship, and I'm honored to do so. I actually have 10 or 15 minutes, Mariah, to address the commission, not 30 seconds like I had here in Florida. And of course, the head doctor on their commission, and I don't know if you've ever met him, is Dr. Berry, last name Dr. Berry, who comes out of the addiction medicine world. Unbelievable prohibitionist bent. So my goal is just to present to them what we see here in Florida, right? Which is active patients using cannabis that's well regulated and hopefully well tested. And we got to talk that before we end the green room. Well tested and labeled with terpene profiles and all that, right? And it's the unregulated market right now, right? And that's what I said up there. And I plan on being strong in my comments to the board. You need to take your arrow, okay, off the target of the legitimate cannabis world, okay, whether you like it or not, and off the doctors that are trying to do it in the appropriate fashion, and put it in the unregulated cannabis space, where there's dishonest people saying all THC is equal, right? And shucking and jiving various dangerous products. And Mariah knows this, and I know I never put words in other people's mouths. We all have so many friends in this space that want to be in the legitimate cannabis space. They've been closed out by the vertical. That's why as we see these changes that come and the $1.3 million every 2 years and the limited licenses, I hope your view of horizontal, Mariah, does come true. Because
I think we're going to see horizontal in the next few years, but not just that people want to be in this space and can't, because on that side, if you're a capitalist, you're a capitalist. You can say all day that you're better than someone else because you're on this market or that market. But if you're in it for money, you're in it for money. On my side, my stance is there's over 1 million consumers in Florida, well over, who aren't on the registry. More patients come to me not on the registry than on. And that should be concerning in a state where you have a legal program that it's so inaccessible and expensive. And you have the invasion of privacy. A sheriff can pull up behind my car and look at my medical records on my license plate, which would never fly in any other world, but in the world of cannabis now. So there's a lot of reasons people aren't signing up for patient registries and or going back to the underground market after coming onto the legal market. And they need to stop stifling, like you said, the patient-physician relationships.
Yeah, no, I mean, we see it that we've been stuck between 750 and 800,000 patients for months, not because we don't see new patients every day, because we do, but as many people are dropping out of the program as they're coming in.
Well, not just that, but a large number of patients signed up for the registry just to feel safer with their product they already had from whoever they already had it from. They're not going to purchase legal product. They just believe that card offers them a little bit of protection should they be caught.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
What's your view on the testing that's going on right now in Florida, Mariah? Are you a believer in the legitimacy of the testing coming, out of the state, from the state? I know you and I both have a lot of friends in the testing space. Where do you fall to that extent?
You're talking about like the
the percentage of
product,
THC,
right? Okay.
Percentage of THC on labels, the quality of labeling of terpenes and other minor cannabinoids in the products, things like that.
Well, what's crazy is when I had illegal product and I was trying to get it tested, you sometimes have to be like the first naive person to start moving the ball on some of these things. From, asking the physicians at St. Jude and having them be like, you need marijuana, to like, I called government labs and was like, hey, I need this product tested. So I was calling around to an environmental labs actually. And what I was finding is, and some actually would take your product. It was crazy, even though it was completely federally illegal. There were labs that had the ability to do these tests. And what you were seeing, and I've said this for so long, no two labs were coming out with the same numbers. It was very concerning all across the country. No two labs were ever coming back with the same numbers, which is obviously why we have in place the variances. But at what variance do we consider it to be null and void or just so ridiculous? And that's what we're seeing now is we just don't have the means to test in a way that's going to be consistent across the board. It's scary.
Well, it's tough to get standards in cannabis. It just is from a lot, of different reasons. Yeah. What's next for you, Mariah? What's your early goals for, next year? And tell us a little bit about WISE and where your focus is right now, and how can we help? How can people get involved and push cannabis progress forward?
Well, there's a lot of MMTCs who have said they support home grow. So hopefully as we move forward toward launching a voters initiative next month, we see that actual support. I think because it has been, we're going to run it parallel to the adult use initiative simply for the fact that works for everyone. There's a lot of money involved in passing a constitutional amendment. And if you can place one alongside one that's well funded, even just for like the earned media and the signature gathering, whatever that is. So they have nothing to do with each other. And behind the scenes, they're not related. So we're running them parallel simply for the logistics of the thing. So I think some MMTCs are going to take the opportunity to avoid or to come up with an excuse to avoid supporting. And that's actually really, really sad. So what I want people to know is the reason some of the acceptance of this narrative of like, yeah, it should have included home grow, it should have included this and that, knowing full well we're under a single subject rule in Florida and can never do that. We can only, that is why a lot of activists, advocates, community members have introduced initiatives that they knew would not go far. They did it to get the public support to go on to other ventures and make a name for themselves and or to raise money for their own nonprofits. We've had attorneys review most of the initiatives that have come out over the past many, many years, let's say half a decade since medical was 2016. We'll just say from there on. They're not going to pass. They're not even going to pass Supreme Court review. And people know this going into it, and they still push. They try to make it like as if they're just so on board with the community. They're willing to do this. Oh no, it didn't pass Supreme Court review. Like that's very selfish. That's disgusting. So what we need to be looking at is the people pushing those false narratives and why. No constitutional amendment can ever include more than one simple thing at a time. And that means you have to be very careful, even when you're talking about one subject. If you start including numbers, limitations, it can be rejected for not including something it needed to include, but it can be rejected for including something it shouldn't have included. And by the time
can't chew gum and walk at the same time.
Oh my God.
By the time you're getting over $1 million worth of signatures, right? Because by the time you get up to 250,000 signatures, you go to Supreme Court review, and then you need 1 million to get on the ballot. So at 250,000 signatures to get to Supreme Court review, you're at well over 1 million in expenditures, probably closer to, very, very high numbers. And if it fails Supreme Court review, that was all for nothing. So we had to start saying, even though we know people are going to spin a false narrative, we've got to do what we know will pass and actually move the ball forward. Yeah. Some of us don't have the privilege in waiting for perfection. There are people who are actually suffering and actually need help, or who can't afford the medical program, et cetera. So how we're doing this is we're going into session hopeful that broadening and fixing the current medical program before adult use comes is at the front of the minds of the Republican politicians who are in control of the House and Senate right now. And those discussions with me, it seems to be very well understood. In states that pass adult use without strong medical programs, the medical program disappears. So over the next 2 years, the legislature has to be focused on reciprocity and telehealth and research and employee protections, potentially home cultivation. We know that they're looking at taking the market horizontal. What does that look like for existing licenses and upcoming licenses versus, a completely separate group of people who will be on a horizontal market? So those are all things being taken into consideration over the next 4 to 5 years. But this year and next
4 to 5
year,
years. I got it. Yeah. I'm glad you said 4 to 5 years. But this year and next year, we really are pushing for that main list of broadening just the medical program. Well, and listen, the doctors will be there, of course, in support of pretty much every one of the issues that, that you speak to. And that's why I wanted to have you on, and we'll have you back, Mariah. Yeah, and listen, Ruta, I told you, a powerhouse awesome. in the industry, and out there doing her thing every day. Can viewers get involved right now in backing anything that's going on, be it WISE, be it the Early Home Grow Initiative? Where can people start to really focus to pay attention into what's going on?
So a couple of the MMTCs this coming month are launching membership drives where they will be offering discounts for either Canna Moms or WISE members. So we're in the process over the holiday season of actually putting up the membership options so that someone can sign up and call themselves an annual member. And once they have that,
doesn't want to be a Canna Mom. I mean, after all, and just your story about going on and selecting that name was a bold statement, 10 years ago. So I'm an optimist, and it's so joyous to hear about what's going on with you and your family, Mariah, of course, and we're going to leave the green room this year with optimism, because seriously, if you look at the 10-year period of time, and this clinic, everybody, 6 years, we'll have our anniversary on January 3rd, which is, I know, isn't that crazy, Mariah?
It is. And I just love knowing people like you. I mean, you individually, obviously, but then also that people like you exist makes it very hopeful for people on our side, from the caregiver or patient or even just activist and advocate standpoint, we have professionals who genuinely believe in this and want to help. So thank you.
No, listen, we're going nowhere, and we tell our patients it's the consistency of what we do every day that is what we're so proud of, and it's because of stories like yours and your daughters and really all the other now millions of patients, of course. And what would you say? Your eyes can't unsee what they've already seen. There was a line you used earlier that I really liked. Give me the one again, Mariah.
Right.
Because
you can't unsee what you see with your own eyes.
Yeah, you can't unsee what you see with your own eyes. And I think that'll be a line. Don, make sure you write that one down for me. Because I mean, I remember that's going to be utilized in my presentation to the West Virginia board, because I'm not a researcher and I'll never be a researcher, but we see it every day and you can't undo it. So it drives us forward with passion. And we will have you on again in the green room. Will not be another 110 episodes before we get you in, because you're such a fantastic guest. Well, we never go past 9:05, so we're right there.
We're still good. So everybody listening, please enjoy your holidays. Stay safe and Happy New Year, everybody.
Have a great holiday, Mariah. Best to you and your family.